Over 200,000 games of baseball have been played since its inception, and while there's been quite a lot of good games, and also some pretty bad ones, on the ultra rare chance you'll find a game that transcends the others. A time where a pitcher steps onto the mound and displays their sheer and utter dominance. As of this recording, there have been 326 no-hitters in baseball history, an average of about 2 per year. Last year, there were 6, including one from Mr. Slapdick himself, Blake Snell. But out of all of those, only 24 remain as being truly perfect. The most elusive achievement for any pitcher, the perfect game, is perhaps the greatest symbol of triumph that can be attained. Some of the greatest of all time are up here: Cy Young, Don Larson, Sandy Koufax, and more. Since the turn of the millennium, there's been an uptick in their frequency. Randy Johnson throwing one at 40, Roy Halladay at the top of his game, the triple perfecto in 2012, and of course, my good old Rays being on the receiving end of 3 separate ones. Mark Burley coming out of nowhere, Dallas Braden's mama energy, and the king himself in front of his court. You achieve that glory, and you'll be remembered forever. But to come so close, only to falter right at the end, is something that's maybe even more memorable. Many people have come close to perfection. 8 have lost it in the 9th since 2010. But to get right to the edge, within an out, a strike even, of immortality, only to watch it all crumble, is an even rarer feat. 13 men belong in this exclusive club who've had perfection slip through their fingers. These are their stories. Only a couple months after Cy Young threw the first perfect game in the modern era, George Hooks Wiltse would step out to try and do the same. He was quietly doing well for himself in his career, being a solid part of the 1905 Giants World Series team, and in '08 he put together his best season, throwing a 2.24 ERA with nearly 7 WAR. On Independence Day, for the first game of a doubleheader against the Phillies, he would go out and throw the game of his life. Facing guys like John Titus, Sherry McGee, and Kitty Bransfield, all of whom finished in the top 10 NL hitters, Wiltse would cut them down efficiently, his sidearm delivery nailing hitter after hitter. In the 4th, Eddie Grant would hit a liner to left that would be caught by Mike Donlin, the closest any Philly player would get to a hit all day. Wiltse would get all the way down to the last man, the opposing pitcher, George McQuillan, who was silently throwing his own great game, keeping the contest scoreless. On a 1-2 count, just a single strike away, Wiltse threw a curve that cut sharply to the heart of the plate for the punch-out. Everyone in the stadium agreed, even McQuillan, who began heading back for the dugout. Everyone except umpire Charlie Rigler, who called it a ball. Of course, there's no way to know for sure if the call was that bad or not, but even the Philadelphia Inquirer had admitted Wiltse got the K. I suppose we'll never know, as on the very next pitch, the ball would strike Grant in the shoulder, and the perfecto would be no more. At the very least, Wiltse would get the last laugh, as while the Giants wouldn't score in the bottom half, he would go out in the 10th to retire the side, and in the bottom half, Al Bridwell would walk it off to secure the win. Wiltse would go down as the only man to throw an extra inning no-hitter without a walk. And well, even Wriggler would come around, acknowledging that he made the wrong call. Every time I saw Charlie Wriggler after that, he gave me a cigar. Another man who got the short end one summer day was Tommy Bridges, looking to join the club of now 5 men who've achieved perfection. Needless to say, his 1932 season was pretty good. 3.36 CRA, 4.3 WAR, one of the few bright spots on an otherwise mediocre Tigers team. But on this day, they would put on a clinic, decimating the Senators in quick fashion. A 7-run inning in the 4th would get it going, with Bridges even contributing with a 2-run single. On the opposite end of the bump, he was mowing down the broken Sens with ease. Of course, when you give up 7 runs in 1 inning, it tends to be a bit demoralizing. The beatdown would only continue, as the Tigers would plate 4 more in the 8th to build the lead up to 13-0. All that was left was for Bridges to finish the job, in front of an ecstatic crowd. He would get the first 2 out, but for the 27th man, pinch hitter Dave Harris would step up to the plate. Now, putting in a pinch hitter down by 13 is certainly a choice, but of course no one wants to be on the other side of a perfect game, and clearly Washington skipper Walter Johnson would agree. And as Harris stared down history, he would smack a ball to left center to save the Sens from the history books. Of course, Harris would feel no guilt towards breaking the moment. As the Detroit Free Press would write, "It takes courage to deliver a hit in a situation like that. A faint-hearted person never would have dared to do it. He would have feared the boos of the crowd and the jibes of the other players." The game would be one of 4 no-hitters that Bridges would lose in the 9th between this year and the next, a man snake-bitten to be unable to finish the job. He would go down as one of the best pitchers of the 30s, a 6-time All-Star and 2-time champion. He sits 5th on the list of most strikeouts in Tigers history. But even after his time in the majors came to an end, he would never again come close to perfection. But hey, there is a happy ending to this story, as he would be sent to the minors and play 4 years on the Portland Beavers of the Pacific Coast League. There, on April 20th, 1947, he would finally get his no-hitter. It was also during this time that the perfect game would become an ultra-rarity. 34 years passed between Charlie Robertson's game in 1922 and Don Larson's World Series gem in 1956, the longest gap between perfect games in history. Though just 2 years after Larson did it, Billy Pierce would have his eyes set on recording number 7. As perhaps the best player on the '58 White Sox, it still wasn't enough to help him out, as by the end of June they sat 3 games under 500 and 11.5 out of first. But luck was hopefully beginning to turn around for them, as they would begin a 3-game set against, oh look at that, the Senators again, who were playing even worse at this point. Pierce had been originally set to pitch the previous night against New York, but a rainout delayed the game, bringing him out here. A sparse crowd of 11,000 people filed into Comiskey Park to watch what would hopefully be a good bounce-back game. Indeed, in the 3rd, Chicago would get out with a single by Jim Landis to take a 1-0 lead. That's when Pierce really began to settle in. By the 5th, the bystanders were beginning to feel the energy. In the 6th, Ken Aspermonte would smack one down the third base line, where Billy Goodman would field the weird hop and make the play to keep the dream alive. Into the 9th he went, a ground out and strikeout bringing him 1 out away. And, just as the Sens did 36 years prior, a pinch hitter would come and spoil the fun, as Ed Fitzgerald would slice the first pitch down the right field line for a double. Perhaps enraged by the broken history, Pierce would fire 3 straight fastballs down the plate to record the 27th out in about 30 seconds. He then headed down to the locker room, shook a few hands, and went home. Coming so close to history only to have it be lost at the very end has to be crushing for these guys. As even when you're playing a meaningless game in the middle of June, these pitches feel like threading the needle on a heart-stopping moment. Sure, Pierce would have an outstanding career, 7-time All-Star, a 197 ERA in 55, but he would never achieve that mark, the one that would put his name in the history books forever. Sometimes, I guess, it just isn't meant to be. On the other side of the Windy City, another man would be stricken with being remembered not for being a dominant pitcher for years, but for the agony of watching perfection slip away. In his second to last year, Milt Pappas was right in the thick of a solid Cubs rotation, one that helped keep him in contention until the end of the year. That being said, as the season was drawing to a close, he wasn't exactly enthusiastic about heading out to the mound. On the morning of September 2nd, 1972, he awoke with a head cold, another annoyance to add on to an aggravating campaign that featured a broken finger and 30 shots of cortisone in his elbow. On a grim day in Wrigley, with a vicious storm bellowing in from Lake Michigan, Pappas begrudgingly took the mound, his wife being the only reason he even went out there, to face the lowly Padres. Right away, the Cubs would get on the board, with 2 runs in the first, and 2 more in the third. Using his trademark slider, Pappas would do his job well, keeping the Padres off the board. Though, to be fair, this was the lowest scoring team in the league here. There were 3, and only 3, moments where his run was even threatened. Enzo Hernandez laid down a bunt in the 4th, which would have easily allowed him to reach had it not rolled foul, and he was fanned on the next pitch. The next inning, Kissinger would make the pick on the third base line and nail Colbert by a hair. And in the 8th, Darryl Thomas would hit one right back to Pappas, who quickly snagged it, whirled around, and fired to first to make the play. Into the 9th he went, 3 outs away from perfection. 8 years prior to the day, he found himself 4 outs away from a no-hitter in Baltimore, before losing it in the 8th. Now, here he was to remedy his past mistakes. Johnny Jeter would hit one to left, and Bill North would slip and fall trying to track the ball, but Billy Williams was able to run in and make the catch. Fred Kendall would go down on a grounder, bringing the 27th man up, pinch hitter Larry Stahl. After working the count to 1-2, 2 sliders would just miss to bring it full. 3-2, perfection on the line, 1 pitch to seal the deal.
Watch it. It's a ball, and Pappas is enraged.
Oh boy. Yeah, let's just say this won't be the last umpire moment. Was it a check swing? Was it not? I mean, I would say so, but that's just baseball for you. Everything comes down to a split-second decision by 1 man. Truly, just amazing. 3 pitches later, a pop-up to second would end the game, at least preserving the no-hitter, but the tension was felt throughout the clubhouse even long after the game. This is the first time in my life I felt a letdown with a no-hitter, said third baseman Ron Santo. Of course, Pappas made sure to keep it professional, congratulating Bruce Fleming on a great game. I was just hoping that he might sympathize with me since it was a perfect game, he would say. The second-year ump would ultimately stand by his call, even long after his 37-year career came to an end. But it was clear how bitter Pappas really was, even long after he retired, concluding a great career. He still resented that call. I still, to this day, don't understand what Bruce Fleming was going through in his mind at the time, Pappas told ESPN in 2007. Why didn't he throw up that right hand like the umpire did in the perfect game with Don Larson? It's a home game in Wrigley Field. I'm pitching for the Chicago Cubs. The score is 8-0 in favor of the Cubs. What does he have to lose by not calling the last pitch a strike to call a perfect game? If it's a blatant pitch that anybody can see it's a ball, then he should have called a ball. But it wasn't. It just goes to show you how important these games really are, as one little mistake can make the difference in defining your career, for the right and for the wrong reasons. And as we'll soon see, Pappas is not the only one who's been bit by a bad call. "11 years later, another Milt would face a similar outcome. Milt Wilcox is a man that you wouldn't expect to see on this list. Only 13.3 career WAR, the third lowest out of everyone here. Yet here he was, taking the bump as the 1982 season kicked off against the White Sox. Of course, an April game in Chicago meant 43-degree weather at first pitch and 12-mile-per-hour winds, but it wasn't enough to deter the nearly 20,000-strong crowd and Wilcox from pitching his magnum opus. As the game went on, retiring batter after batter, he seemed to be only growing in intensity. Harold Baines nearly ended it in the 7th, but the liner was snagged just in time to keep it going. Detroit would pile on to make it 6-0, leaving the only question as to whether Wilcox could finish the job. Once again, he would make it to the 9th unimpeded. Even the White Sox fans would cheer him on, anxious to see history in the making. As he went to take the mound, the opposing fans would give him a standing ovation. A flyout and groundout would get him 1 out away, where good old Tony La Russa would sub in Jerry Hairston to pinch hit.
He swings, base hit, center field. Hairston spoils the bid.
Let's just acknowledge the fact that you can hear people booing on this call.
Hairston banged the ball.
White Sox fans were booing their own team for getting a hit. That's how important this moment was. Wilcox would get the next man out, securing his one-hit shutout and eventually going on to throw a good year, his last before his career began to fizzle out. Was he nervous in the moment? Of course he was. Who wouldn't be? Being up there with perfection on the line, it's so easy to get overwhelmed by those thoughts. Pitching a perfect game puts you in the Hall of Fame. That's the only way I'm going to get there. Well, he might not have sealed the deal, but at least he was still able to be remembered. "1988 is definitely a year to be forgotten for Ron Robinson, well on his way to a regretful campaign. I mean, when you're behind Danny Jackson and Tom Browning, it's easy to be overlooked. But on one cool day in May, he would take the mound to face the Expos in a game that would quickly come to define his career. Just 7 months removed from arthroscopic elbow surgery, Robinson was kept on a pitch limit going into today. But he was able to make the most of it, only letting the count go full twice through 6 innings. After the Reds scored again to make it 3-0, the benches would clear on a wild throw to Daniels. As he kept piling on the outs, the wind was beginning to change in Riverfront Stadium. Superstition is paramount in the show, the fear of jinxing it, not wanting to be the one to break history. Robinson sat by himself in the dugout, not a word spoken to him. With each strikeout, the crowd roared behind him. Everybody in the stadium knew the gravity of what was happening. Into the ninth, Robinson only had 81 pitches to his name, and was 3 outs away from perhaps the most dominant perfect game of all. A ground out and fly out had the crowd screaming their heads off as the 27th man came walking up to the plate. As is tradition at this point, a pinch hitter would step in the box, Wallace Johnson. And watching the broadcast, you could feel the tension in the air. The announcers not even saying a word as Robinson got set to make his last push. A called strike made it 0-1, then 2 balls would bring it to 2-1. Johnson would swing and miss for strike 2, and just listen to the crowd. This is a game in May, for a team 9 years removed from the playoffs, against another team that was historically bad for pretty much their entire existence. And yet these people are cheering like it's Game 7 of the World Series. Of course, for Ron Robinson, it might as well have been. But, well, you know how this story ends. To pour salt in the wound, Tim Raines would slap one out of the park to cut the deficit to 3-2. In an instant, a perfect game, no-hitter, and shutout were all lost. Robinson would leave the game after that, receiving a standing ovation as he headed into the dugout. He wouldn't even get the honor of finishing the game, as reliever John Franco would get the last out. In the end, Robinson's efforts became a footnote in Reds history, as just 4 months later, Tom Browning would finish what he couldn't, throwing the first perfect game in franchise history. But there was no animosity felt between the two, as Ron would celebrate right alongside him. It definitely would have made me richer, more famous, the first in Reds history. There were a lot of firsts it would have made me, but it didn't. But it was great to pitch that game. It was a special occasion. Just to pitch that far into the game after going through my arm surgeries. I was happy. Just getting there, being in that moment, is enough for some people. Especially for a guy like Ron Robinson. Even if he wasn't able to secure it, that moment remains a fond memory even all these years later. Out of everybody here, Dave Stieb has to be the most cursed. His struggles are well known, one of the best pitchers in Jays history, but always struggling to close it out. A no-hitter broken in the ninth by back-to-back homers in '85 was his first attempt. In '88, he was 1 strike away on 2 straight starts, and both bids were broken by the 27th man. But his most dominant effort up to that point came in August of 1989, where he faced the Yankees in another push for glory. Up and down they went like clockwork, a tale he's already become very familiar with. All the while, the Jays could only put up 5 hits and 2 runs to support him. At this point, I think we all know the story. Stieb would get Morris and Phelps on back-to-back strikeouts, and would face Roberto Kelly with 1 out to go. The first 2 pitches would miss for balls, and, well, I'll just let the announcer take it away.
Holy cow, he broke it up with 2 outs! I don't believe it! Unbelievable!
It's disappointing, but I've been through it before, Stieb said as he soldiered on to finish the game, even after his shutout was broken with an RBI. Nonetheless, he still got the win, and would take the punch with stride. To lose 1 perfect game on the last out is hard enough, but to do so after already having lost 3 no-hitters before in the ninth, at this point, it just becomes numbing. Yet, that didn't stop him from becoming a legend in Toronto, a 7-time All-Star, and a name that will be remembered for years to come. And well, 1 year later, he would get his happy ending.
Has got a no-hitter for Dave Stieb. The long frustration is finally over. The first in Toronto Blue Jay history.
Ah, good old Captain Ahab. Just 8 months later, our next case would come from an even more unlikely source. A man who was just scooped up by the Mariners from a trade with the Expos, which also involved a little guy who actually completed the perfecto. He played good enough in '89 to earn the spot as opening day starter in 1990, and on his third game of the season, he walked into Oakland with purpose, even if the rest of the team was kinda lackluster in comparison. They were literally no-hit a week before this game, and this A's lineup was no slouch. Mark McGwire, Ricky Henderson, and Rays legend Jose Canseco. The pressure was certainly on, as Holman struggled in warm-ups, so badly that relievers were placing bets on when he'd be pulled out of the game. But well, fate can be funny sometimes. Through 4, both teams remained scoreless, with Holman somehow keeping the potent A's offense off the board. The Mariners would open the scoring with 2 runs in the 5th, and still the A's couldn't respond. McGwire would blast one to deep center that surely must have been the end, but Ken Griffey Jr. would make the catch at the track, keeping the dream alive. In the 7th, he faced the top of the order for the last time, getting Henderson on a flyout and Stan Javier to ground out. Canseco would put up a fight, but Holman wouldn't back down, smoking a fastball right by him to get past the most dangerous part of the lineup. As he walked back to the dugout, it became clear what was transpiring. I sat down and everybody got away from me. I looked up at the scoreboard and saw zeros all the way. Suddenly, the prospect was looking much more attainable than ever. McGwire flew out to right. Hasse struck out. Steinbach ground out. 3 outs away. As the M's came up to bat in the 9th, Holman even unexpectedly had a plate appearance. As the inning prior, Jim Lefevre subbed in DH Pete O'Brien to field, giving up the DH and forcing Holman to hit. He came up to the on-deck circle despite his resistance, begging Cotto to strike out to end the inning. But he would be walked, bringing up the career 111 hitter to the plate. And miraculously, he knocked a ball to second that got away from Mike Gallego, getting him on base. He would get to second before the inning ended, but that time on the base paths was precious moments he could have spent preparing to get to the mound on the 9th, as even the opposing fans were cheering him on. Up stepped Ken Phelps, who served as out number 26 against Steve, and now, 1 year later, was cast into the role of the 27th man. In that moment, Holman's thoughts betrayed him.
I'm going to be in the Hall of Fame. They're going to want my hat and my jersey and my spikes and my glove and my jock and my underwear, and they're going to erect this locker in Cooperstown and put all that stuff, and I'm going to be immortalized for all time.
Well, you know what they say, it ain't over till it's over.
The pitch swung on and a fly ball belted deep to right. Cut out to the track. Fly away.
Holman would go down as the only man to have a perfect game, no-hitter, and shutout spoiled with 1 swing, with 2 outs in the 9th. Coming that close, especially for a man whose career would soon be cut short by injury, is heartbreaking for sure. If there's one thing everyone in this club can share, it's that the pain is mutual, my friend. We won the game, and we went back to the hotel. I woke up at 4 o'clock the next morning, sat up in bed, and screamed as loud as I could. I knew I would never have a chance to do that again. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum, Mike Mussina has pretty much everything going for him. 7-time Gold Glover, 5-time All-Star, and a Hall of Famer. His career was an incredible one from start to finish. Sure, he'd come close before, 1 hit away from a no-hitter on 2 occasions, and one away from a perfect game back in '97. But at least that came with one out in the ninth. This was different. This time, he would finish the job. He had the benefit of a spectacular defensive play, a diving stop by first baseman Clay Bellinger to get the first out in the ninth. 2 batters later, Carl Everett would come up to the plate, the 27th man. Funnily enough, the guy on the other side of the bump was David Cone, who had just thrown a perfecto for the Yankees 2 years prior. "I was completely aware of what he was doing," Cone said. "Part of me wanted to see history, but part of me didn't want to see him do it, because I was the last one to do it. He was so close." Of course, we know how it ends.
That one is into left center, base hit.
In the end, it's not like we can feel bad for Mike Mussina. I mean, he still got the job done and secured the 1-0 win, and would finish the 2001 season with a career-high 7.1 WAR, and, as aforementioned, would make his way into the Hall of Fame. Sure, that pitch is something he will never forget, but at the end of the day, he gets to say he's in the pantheon of legends, something that many others on this list can only dream of. "I did a lot of almost stuff," Mussina said. "Those things didn't happen, but things turned out okay. Now I get to say that I went to the Hall of Fame." Jumping forward a bit, we have the case of Yu Darvish. Fresh off his sensational rookie season and getting ready for his first start of the 2013 season. Facing the Astros, who would go on to have a dreadful campaign, he came out swinging, literally, as 5 of his first 6 batters would strike out. After 4, he already had 9 Ks to his name, after striking out the side. His sheer dominance continued as he would rack up 14 strikeouts to enter the 9th. On the other side, the Rangers would build themselves a nice fat 7-0 cushion, giving Darvish plenty of comfort to shoot his shot for history. Up there on the mound, he looked as comfortable as ever, getting the first 2 men to ground out in just 3 pitches. It seemed like nothing could stop him.
Gonzalez up the middle, base hit.
Man, right through the legs is quite a way to lose a perfecto, but just look at him, laughing about it and smiling like a goober. Hey, it's only your 2nd season in the bigs, and you're already jumping out to be one of the best pitchers in baseball. It's fine. Things like this happen. What are you gonna do, I guess? Well, a year later, when he walked onto the mound with a no-hitter in the 9th with 2 outs, let's just say he felt some deja vu. Yeah, no smiles this time around. But hey, at least he could say he almost got there. "I went as far as I could go, and that was satisfying." And shit, for the early 2010s Rangers, it was definitely bittersweet seeing a heartbreaker at the final out. "I was definitely thinking about what the celebration was going to be like," Ian Kinsler said. "We never take any out for granted in baseball. If any team's not going to take an out for granted, it's probably us." Just 5 months later, we fly to San Francisco for a visit with a man who had destiny on his doorstep. When you think of the mid-2010s Giants, Yusmeiro Petit doesn't exactly come to mind. He'd spent most of his career in the minors, and was cut by the Giants twice this very year, though he chose to accept his reassignment each time. He kept playing not for the fame, but for the love of the game, enjoying every opportunity he received to join the show. Indeed, this night would only be his third start of the season, at a time where the Giants were already looking to next year. Yet he shined on this night, as he induced 13 groundouts, 7 pop-ups, and 7 strikeouts. He didn't reach 3 balls until 2 outs in the 8th. He painted a work of art up there, as manager Bruce Bochy would describe. It was a beautiful game, a tremendous display of pitching. He had the help of Juan Perez diving to make the catch in the 6th to keep the game going, and the energy of the crowd behind him as he walked out in the 9th, almost comparable to a playoff atmosphere. 2 outs later, Eric Chavez would come out to the plate, and Petit would work the count to 3-2. Then he would lace one to left, where Hunter Pence would dive for the catch, and come up just inches short. I said this to a couple teammates. I felt like when it was hit, it was like one of those dreams where you just can't run fast enough, he said. It was a little too far. I gave it my best effort, and it was just a little bit shy. Yet Petit took it in stride, as he got the last out and raised his arms in triumph, finishing his first complete game. It wasn't historic, but for a man who'd spent years toiling in the minors, this was a moment to cherish. Out of everyone here, no one would have expected Yusmeiro Petit to be the one knocking on the door. But that's baseball for you. Anything can happen. He's just done a tremendous job, and he's trying to send a message that this is where he belongs, and where he should be pitching. For the most recent example, we have Max Scherzer, perhaps the craziest looking ballplayer right now. But it doesn't matter when you're a bona fide stud, well on your way to a Hall of Fame career. On this day in June 2015, he came to the mound right after taking a perfecto into the 7th on his last start against Milwaukee. Now, against a Pirates team who'd won 21 of 27, he looked to finish what he started. Sure enough, he was dominant as ever, mowing them all down as he headed into the 9th. The atmosphere was comparable to a World Series game in the middle of June, where everyone there is unexpectedly treated to a historic moment. In classic Scherzer fashion, he didn't even sit in the dugout, instead heading to the clubhouse and changing his undershirt after every inning. That brings us to here. A moment that's gone down for all the wrong reasons. 2 outs, 2 strikes, and Jose Tabata does this.
And the ball, did it hit him? And that's it for the perfect game.
I mean, there's not much that can really be said. It's pretty cut and dry that Tabata leaned into it. But Mike Malinsky made the call that sealed the deal, once again reinforcing that a split-second decision by one man can be the difference between history or not. Is it bullshit? Yeah. But at the end of the day, Scherzer was still able to get the no-hitter, and would eventually get his ring as well, and will almost certainly make it into the Hall of Fame. So, can we really be that mad here? I mean, there is a letdown, just because you're so close, 1 strike away from a perfect game, he said. But to get a no-hitter in front of these fans, there's nothing better. On this journey, we've seen great players and surprising cases, moments of hubris and extreme humility, frustration, resentment, and acceptance. All the wacky ways a perfect game can be lost in this crazy sport we call baseball. A hit by pitch that just barely grazes the arm, a ball between the legs, a home run, and of course, blown calls. A true testament that anything is possible. But there's one I've skipped over, and you all probably know what it is. The most famous example of a perfect game being spoiled on the 27th man, a guy who should be in the Club of Legends, but instead will be barred forever by one missed call. Despite being one of the most historic teams in baseball, no one has thrown a perfect game in Detroit Tigers history. Twice already, we've seen Detroit players come and out away from perfection, only to be blown both times. But on June 2nd, 2010, Armando Galarraga would step up to try and break the curse. A man who would only put up a career 2.5 WAR in 6 years, who found himself in this situation on pure chance. Well, that's baseball for ya. Sometimes it's not the superstars, the ones who've come to define a generation. Sometimes it's the guys you least expect, where the stars align and a miracle is born. You don't want to say anything, you don't want to jinx it. It's a moment that will probably never come to him again. This is his only chance at etching his name into history. You'll do everything you can to preserve it, as Austin Jackson would pull off the incredible catch to keep the dream alive. You'll have the entire stadium cheering you on, your one moment in the sun. You'll see the stars above you, and you'll smile. Your name will be known for all eternity.
Ground ball, right side. Cabrera will cut it off. Galarraga covers. He's out. No, he's safe. He is safe.
I missed it. I missed it. This isn't a call. This is a history call. And I kicked out of it. And there's nobody that feels worse than I do. I take pride in this job, and I kicked out of that, and I took a perfect game away from that kid over there that worked his ass off all night. It's probably the most important call in my career, and I missed it.
After the game, umpire Jim Joyce would meet Galarraga in tears. Instead of spewing hate, rage, or frustration on the call, he forgave him.
A lot of credit to that guy telling me, hey, I need to talk to you because I really say I'm sorry. Nobody's perfect.
And for these 13 men, even if they came just shy of perfection, they'll still be remembered until the end of time.